Yes, I too am very disappointed with this situation we find ourselves in this evening. And I don't know, maybe you'll explain to us, last Thursday when we were dealing with this bill, it was Minister of State, Deputy Collins was here, and I don't think he's any role, or maybe he has, didn't get to check his portfolio, but I thought it was education. And so we should all be in education, because I think the government needs to learn a lot from this behaviour. Have you not even listened to the Uachtaráin Hearing when he criticised last Christmas, after Christmas, the amount of legislation that he had to deal with sent to him? I think we've 12 pieces of legislation will be delivered out in the coming weeks. And I know that this is a whole new bill. We realised we were shocked when the Minister so glibly and quite arrogantly told us that he'd be introducing 5 new sets of amendments. I think it was 6 when it came, and 69 different amendments. You come in and tell us they're mostly technical. A lot of these things aren't technical at all, and it's ham-fisted, it's rushed, and it's very, very serious legislation. Now, I mean, you made a plea then to us on this side of the House regarding the short-term lettings and how urgent that is. Did you only find this out in the last couple of weeks, that there was a problem with short-term lettings? I mean, I don't know. It beggars belief what's driving you, who you're working for, or whatever. And as I said, the legislation then, so long ago we dealt with the maritime bill that was discussed here, and here you have a plethora of amendments again to tell us that we don't take them now and we don't deal with them, we mightn't get in the richer 2030 targets. This is only now you found that out. So we're telling you that with the ages that were, until such time we reach our the targets that we've set, that we must keep our lights on by some form or other, to keep them working and keep them on and keep some kind of energy, because it's going to be slow and it's going to be very, very difficult and challenging. But we can't just sign a blank cheque here for wind developers or whoever else offshore or, out to sea, which I'm not against, but I certainly think that we need time to scrutinise it, because there's ecology and there's whatever wildlife in the sea that must be protected as well. So I think it's very sharp practice, and it's very, 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 very poor. And then in the middle of it all, and in conjunction with this, an inquiry going on into Bord Pleanála. What's Joe Public going to think about this? You know, many of them that felt, you know, didn't get a fair hearing. There are many that I'm dealing with, not to mind to say, in my constituency, that have had, you know, issues with planning, went to appeal. The inspector from Bord Pleanála came down, did their job as they're applied to do as inspectors, and gave a report. And the reports 90% of the time were rejected by a few members of the board we know now. We didn't know before. I didn't know I had insight that only 3 members maybe look at it and adjudicate. And so what's the point in paying the inspectors if this is going to go on? So this inquiry, first of all, there was nothing, and then there was more, and there was nothing, and then we saw a resignation last week, Friday night, I think, of a pretty senior person. So confidence in the planning system is at an all-time low. Our county in Tipperary just finished the county development, and after a lot of work, and I want to thank the planners, indeed the councillors finished it last Monday, and a lot of work, and for that to bed in and settle, and we'll have to live with that for the next 5 years. This last one I think was 7 years because of COVID and everything else, and delayed and everything else. But the only way we found out about Bord Pleanála was because of judicial reviews. And now I think you're going to try and curtail them as well. And, you know, this legislation is as a result of a Supreme Court case, or some of it is certainly to deal with that, but it's kind of dealt in a kind of a way, telling those 11 gentlemen across the river with the wigs and gowns that don't mess with us. We can change the rules to make you comply, or to make you more compliant. So I'm very, very disappointed. I'm very disappointed because I know you. And I knew you before ever you were in government, to be reasonable and to be flexible. But I'm thinking you're spending too much time with the senior minister, how could I forget his name, Darragh O'Brien, or the new Rambos I call him, from Dublin North. because the arrogance is oozing out of him. And it wouldn't mind if we were doing anything meaningful, like building houses that we need for the people. But to try and come in and tell us that we're shameful and we're not right and we're not responsible, we're not accepting these, okay, you've withdrawn, I think you said 25, you've withdrawn in relation to the judicial review, but you wouldn't withdraw any if you weren't challenged. And to be critical of the media, legislation has to be, it's a duty on us to interrogate, to examine, and to try and amend or point out the flaws, but we can't do that with no time. When I questioned this last week, I was told by the Minister flippantly that you'd have a briefing next Monday. That was last Monday. But some of us have commitments in constituency. We just can't drop of a hat because you're forced in to give a briefing on a Monday here. And then, as Deputy Bader said, the only explanatory memorandum that arrived came this morning at 2 minutes to 9. And can I also say, in fairness to the bills officers and the drafters and everybody, they've worked all night some nights recently. It's totally unfair on those good people, and they do great work. Totally unfair to feist all this legislation, not only this bill, but we have 3 or 4 or 5 of them today, feist it all on top of them, and they expect them to work all night through to deal with it. And so the best people in the world will make mistakes in that kind of situations because typos and everything else, because lack of sleep and tiredness. You think you're someone, you could teach some of the dictators, the regimes they have, out foreign how to sleep deprivation and everything else. But look, it's a mess as far as I'm concerned. It's like filling a mixer when you're mixing the concrete. You've fired everything into the mix here and hoping that it'll come out in a good mix. But it won't. It'll come out in a dodgy mixture like liquor all sorts, and we won't have anything decent as a result. And no impact analysis in any of the legislation, now this legislation especially, to see how it's bedding in, no review clause, no nothing. So it's a Wild West kind of legislation, as I said, going from the Board Penala, from short-term lets to the maritime bills as well regarding wind, and making it empowering, giving more power to the office of the planning regulator. How do we manage in Ireland, in our little country, ever before we had the office of the planning regulator? I remember being in the county council back in the 90s and being there again in the 2000s and making our county development plans. And we hadn't to be looking over our shoulder, and we hadn't to be browbeaten by the office of the planning regulator and be told at every step that, look, the office of the planning regulator won't accept this. So are we taking away every last vestige of power that the elected members of the county council have, councillors have, where they had the making of the plan? And now you have, first of all, you had to fight for management. You could never get independent legal advice. It wasn't available to you. You had to take the same legal advice that the manager got, which was totally unfair and discriminatory, unless you wanted to pay for it yourself. That was prohibitive. You couldn't do it. And now we have the office of the planning regulator as well. So it seems to me you have all these offices now, and all these officers in these offices with brass plates on the walls and fancy furniture and nice jobs for the boys. And I did last week, and I say it again, and I think Deputy McGrath is still here. He was critical of me for criticising the NGOs and criticising on Taoiseach. I make my criticism without fear or favour, because what they did in relation to the Glanbia plant, the cheese plant in Kilkenny, was nothing short of national sabotage. National sabotage. They had no issues, I'll probably be repetitive now, Chairman might allow me, they had no issue with the plant, with the emission licence, with the planning, with anything else. Their issue was with the head number. And how they could be allowed to have a situation that they could object to this and go to the courts with it several times, I think 3 or 4 times, and threaten to go to the European Court, I think, as well. And in fairness to the Taoiseach, I don't give him much praise, but he did say one day to me here that this system of judicial reviews will have to be looked at, because it was held up. Thank God the sod was turned on it 2 weeks ago, and it's coincidence. We're so lucky that the Dutch investors stayed with us, stayed the course, because this wouldn't happen anyplace else. And now it's been built. And meanwhile, we were lorrying in big laden trucks full of milk up to Strathroy and all over the country. No talk of the carbon footprint of that. So the narrow-mindedness and the whole pettiness of Taoiseach. And when we had a meeting with Deputy Ely Ray here and myself and our colleagues, We cannot let this stay in. Now, I never was against Antashka because they did great work in Tidy Village and Heritage and with the green flag schemes and many other. I'm not dismissing that they should stay at that, but I do question their role in the likes of that and many other areas. They're do-gooders, well paid, well heeled, and not many of them retired senior good positions and good pensions. And the trouble they're putting householders through and people want to build their own homes through is not in short disgraceful. Now, I'm not reckless. We don't have good planning. But I must take up Deputy Barrett, and he might. I know his good colleague, Deputy Gino Kinney, was down walking my mountains, I call them, Knockmill Down Mountains, 2 weeks ago, and you're all welcome. But he might come sometime. I don't know how you'd move a mountain. Deputy Barrett, you said the mountain was moved by Derry Bryan. Now, I haven't been on Derry. The mountain. There was a slippage, a landslide. Yeah. That's not moving a mountain. You don't move a mountain.
I said it fell down.
No, you said the mountain fell down, yeah, but the mountain couldn't fall down. Yeah. I mean,
a small bit of a slip.
A small bit of a slip. Look, anyway, I'm just saying that we get carried away in our language too. Come and see the mountains, like mountains.
Not a chance. Carried away with language.
Yeah, I mean, the mountain fell.
I'm being friendly.
The mountain fell down, but thank God it didn't fall on top of anyone anyway, so there'd be more calamities. But I do know now that that's subject of a court case as well. But, Minister, I think this is just totally anathema to good governance, to good legislation, and it smacks of pure just disrespect for opposition and for everybody else, and it'll be wide open for legal challenges. And while I'm not in favour of, I'm in favour of houses being built and everything else, but I'm not in favour of the big conglomerates building numerous houses, and they can get ease of access to planning, and they can kind of adjust it as they go along. That's not good legislation either. So we must think of the small, the Dina Bioga, the small people. They want to build their house. And I have at least 20 in my county, young couples that have the wherewithal, have a site, and can't get planning to build a house in the middle of a housing crisis. So, I mean, there's a lot of things could have been addressed in this bill and they're not. So, look, I'll leave it at that for the moment, but I'm hugely disappointed and very disappointed that this is the way it came. And you might give an explanation to me, if you can, as to why it was Minister Collins, nothing against him, but he was here last week. He's in the Education Department dealing with this piece of legislation that only added insult to injury. Deputy